How do you become an instructional designer when it was never part of your plan? Well, that's what we're going to explore in this episode of Tales from the L&D Bookshelf, where I sit down with Cammy Bean, author of The Accidental Instructional Designer, to talk about the realities of landing in learning by chance and what it takes to continue growing in that role with purpose. We explore her 4 slices of the pie framework that she describes in the book, practical strategies for working with SMEs, and what it really means to build learning that's creative, tech-savvy, business-focused, and rooted in solid learning science. I'm thrilled to welcome to our conversation here Cammy Bean. Cammy, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. David, thanks for having me. It's always fun to chit chat with you on L&D stuff.
You as well. So let's start with this, just a brief intro. Obviously, you and I are friends. I know your work very well, but for those who may be watching this conversation who aren't that familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how you got into the field.
Yeah, so like many of you all, I did not intend to be an instructional designer when I grew up. I kind of thought I'd be a writer or a teacher. I was an English major, German studies major in college. I graduated from university. I came to the beautiful city of Boston and looked to find a job. I landed in operations at a company that was putting online a call center on a computer for the first time. This is back in 1992, if you can go back that far, right? So we were learning how to use a mouse in the workplace for the very first time. And I kind of fell into this role where I was the person helping translate the needs of the end user. These were childcare workers and teachers who'd moved into corporate space as counselors, translate their their user requirements to the IT nerds. And I was like translating that. We built a system. It was called the ACEs. Not that that matters, but then we needed trainers, and I kind of fell into that role because I knew the system. So I was a subject matter expert turned trainer. I had the good jazz hands. I could talk in front of a classroom, and I could write newsletters and tip sheets and just do all that communication that goes around it. So I was kind of like anointed. I picked myself. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I want to do this. I like being a bit of a performance hog in front of people. Then one thing led to another. So I was there for about 5 years, and I found my way. Next job was a multimedia production company. This was 1996, yeah, last century. The company I was working for was a multimedia production company creating CD-ROMs. So training, it was called CBT, David. What does that stand for?
Computer-based training. We're carbon dating ourselves during this conversation.
Yes, there were not authoring tools. There was not an LMS. SCORM did not exist. It was a totally different world out there. And that day, the first day I went on to that job, I got handed my business card, which said Junior Instructional Designer. And up until that point, I really had no idea that that was a thing, or, obviously I'd interviewed for this job, but yeah, kind of opened up this whole new world for me. I worked in that space for 10 years before cracking open an instructional design book, though. For those of you joining in the chat, does that sound familiar? You kind of fall into this role. I was at a vendor. We were producing e-learning for companies. And it was called Video Information Systems. Yes, Jane, the 1900s. Way back when. Yeah, it was just totally different time. So 10 years into my practice as an instructional designer, I had worked as a freelancer at that point. I'd worked at a company. I'd moved to another boutique e-learning company. I'd taken a side gig as a muscular therapist, massage therapy instructor, and practitioner. I have really good hands, guys. And then we started having children, my husband and I, and somebody needed to go get a real job again because we were doing a lot of freelancing and piecemealing. So I got back to a small boutique e-learning shop. And it was at that point that I said, wow, I've been doing this for 10 years. I should probably do it with some purpose and passion. And I should, if this is really what I'm doing, I need to know what I'm talking about doing. And right here, this is dirty, dusty bookshelf. It is full of instructional design books and L&D related books, and probably everything on your podcast is on this bookshelf, Dave. But I made this really intentional decision to get an informal degree in instructional design. I started connecting with folks like David Kelly, like Jane Bozarth, like Carl Kopp, people who were online blogging, thinking out loud, sharing, showing our work, learning, growing together. It was very exciting times. And yeah, that's kind of how I evolved. Long answer for a short question.
That is a very good answer. And with that, we're out of time. No, I'm just kidding. So you've shared your journey and what you've learned through your book. the accidental instructional designer. And that term has kind of become part of our vernacular, that accidental instructional designer. It's been, I think, about 10 years since the original edition of the book, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so the original book, let's see, when was the original? It came out in 2013, 2014. So somewhere along there, I started working at Kineo, and I've been with Kineo for 16 years. I will sort of arc out my story. So I was the head of learning design for a global learning solutions provider company, 6 or 7 years doing that. Then I made this crazy job shift into becoming an accidental salesperson. Like I crossed over to the dark side as we joke. I'm an account manager. I really nurture our relationships, always with that learning design lens on it though. And that's, if you want to talk about sales in this space, we could have that conversation too. So the Accidental Instructional Designer came out as a book. I had been writing on the blog for years at this point. I had been writing for the Kineo website. I had been writing guides and white papers and all that kind of stuff. The first edition of the book had rubber ducks on the cover, thanks to Julie Dirksen. Here, I have it here. We can see that.
Yeah.
That was the first edition, rubber ducks, and then we upgraded to origami. And so it was really pulling that all together. So why the accidental instructional designer? Because we all land here by accident. I had done a workshop at the Learning Guild. I think that's kind of where it started to create some more shape and form too. You say I invented that term. I really didn't. There's the accidental tourist. I think there's a book called The Accidental Trainer, which I have on my shelf, which I found out about after I read this. I mean, I cannot patent the use of the term accidental in anything. I think we're all accidental. Nobody, we're all accidents. Nobody really in our space, for the most part, thought they were going to grow up and work in HR or L&D or training or talent development, whatever your flavor of it is. It's not on kids' wish list for what they want to be when they grow up.
Rarely. But now you would think if people didn't go to school for this and they find themselves in this, they didn't choose it. A lot of people in this field didn't necessarily take a traditional academic path to learn how to do these things, but they're in these roles. You would think that creates a weakness of the role in the field. But you, in your book, you actually position it as a strength. Why?
Because of course I would, because I have not gone to school and gotten a degree in it.
That was a fabulous
It's very
answer.
self-serving of me, quite frankly. It's interesting. I do think there's a little bit of a shift happening, I think, as more eyes focus on instructional design. I think we are seeing more people moving into degreed programs, certifications. Looking back 20 years ago, we did not have online programs that we could go to and find our way into this field. So times have changed for sure. That said, I think people who are well-intentioned and understand the many pieces of the pie that you have to learn to navigate in this space, I think you can become a great practitioner in this space.
If you do it with intention, which I appreciate the fact that you've done. So you've queued it up beautifully for me. Tell me a little bit about the 4 slices of the pie and break it down.
All right, the 4 slices of the pie. The pie is thanks to Dr. Ellen Wagner, our mutual friend and probably everyone's mentor. Ellen kind of came up with this originally and I ran with it. So I have to give Ellen Wagner all the credit for it, but really kind of thinking about, and this came out of a workshop I had done years ago with Ellen Wagner and Corinne Pagano on shades of instructional design. And we did a session. It was in Orlando Learning Solutions. I don't know what year, 2010 maybe. Probably 2010, so 15 years ago, I would guess. Kind of talking about the secret handshakes of instructional designers. What are all those secret terminology that you all need to know, right? If you go up to another instructional designer and start talking about Bloom's taxonomy, you have a little bit more credibility. Or if you diss Bloom's taxonomy, or if you have a point of view on some learning theorist or something, you're gonna have that credibility. Anyway, pie. So in e-learning, we were thinking kind of more focused on digital learning back then, e-learning development. It was the e-learning guild, but I would apply this pie now to the broader L&D space. So 4 things you have to kind of really get well versed in. One is learning and pedagogy. This is understanding how, adults, so adult learning, how to write good assessment questions, how to design and scaffold learning experiences. This is learning science. This is architecting. This is the big nerdy stuff of making sure that a solution is going to have the right kind of impact. So that's super important. And if you're not doing that, then you're missing a beat and you're just building content. There's the creative piece of the pie, which is particularly with digital learning, but I would say any kind of learning experience, we've got to have a creative element. That's the humanity, that's the storytelling, the visuals. Some people start doing e-learning or instructional design because they're really good at graphics and PowerPoint decks, right? They get pulled into the space because they have good creative chops or they're great storytellers, or they can do the jazz hands, song and dance in front of a classroom. Creativity takes many forms. So there's a creative piece, storytelling. I was a writer. I enjoyed writing. I was really excited about video production. To me, CBT was super glamorous. It sounded so exciting. CD-ROMs, like, wow, it's shiny.
CDs in inter-office mail, that was sexy.
Yeah, super sexy. Then there's the technology piece of the pie. So for me, that was the piece I kind of always stuck my fingers in my ears about and went la la la. I want to think about the learning and the creative parts of it, and someone else can figure out the back end and how to build it. What's the technology you're building it on? SCORM, XE, API, data. You could lump all that stuff in the technology piece, using authoring tools even. And then finally, there's the business piece of the pie. So being able to speak the needs of the business, operating like a consultant, running a project like a project manager. For those of you in the room, if you're an instructional designer, are you also the project manager? Are you also trying to manage a budget? Are you also trying to talk up the chain to stakeholders? You are doing all of these things, right? So the business piece is really, really important. Performance consulting, you kind of name it. So there's a lot that falls into that business piece of the pie. So that's a lot of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one-stop shop people are having to think about all of that in one little tiny person, and they may, I don't know, what's your guess? You think they're doing them all really well?
Well, it depends on the individual, but that actually goes to the next question. I mean, you've worked with a lot of people, a lot of different organizations, a lot of instructional designers, and a lot of them have gone this path where they didn't necessarily go through a foundational educational experience to support their work. They've kind of learned as they go. What slice of the pie do you find people struggle with the most who are coming
So, yeah, when I run workshops, I always ask people, what's your sweet spot? What pulled you into this business? And usually when I'm at a learning conference, it's the learning piece of the pie and the creativity piece of the pie. Then there'll be less strengths in the technology piece, and always the weakest is business. Always the weakest, right? And if you were a subject matter expert and that's what tapped you into training, right? You might have a stronger sense of the business piece, but generally even then I would say that's generally the weakest piece for most people. So you can look, if you're an accidental instructional designer and you're trying to build your skills in your practice, identify what your weakness is, identify what your strength is, like focus on your strength. I think that's obviously something to elevate. Also know what your weakness is, and then use the pie as a way to develop your skills. So start looking across this pie, figure out where your gaps are and how you're going to fill those. You do not need to be 100% on everything. I have spent 30 years in this business, in this industry, whatever you want to call it. I still do not have a totally well-rounded pie. I'm a little off in some pieces, right? But, and the last 8 years, as I've been focusing more on, sales and account management in this space, I've got a little bit more business acumen than I used to have, right? So I've been building that piece of it, and I'm talking to business leaders, and I'm having different kinds of conversations about what their needs are. So depending on the role that you're going for, you might have to, hone that skill a little bit. Now, I will say, David, I'd be interested to get people's take on this right now, because I've been thinking about this a lot. In this day and age, at this moment in time, there's a lot of disruption in our space right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked at the L&D space or instructional design today, if I looked at it, I wonder, would I have wanted to come into this field, or would I think, I don't know, it's all AI driven, like the creativity is going to get pulled out, or I don't know if it would have pulled me in the same way, because things have changed so significantly. Yes, it was 30 years ago in another century.
You got to stop dating it. It's painful. But you're right. I think that we're probably a couple of years away from we're close to it. We see the changes that are coming that maybe aren't as mainstream visible yet. So I don't know that people still see their teachers and that's what learning looks like to them, and that's what being an educator looks like to them. And until that starts getting a little bit very, very different there, I think, oh no, I don't want to do that. It's just managing a computer. The even more disruptive or depressing way that I would add to your question is, what creative space isn't going to have that barrier in the future? I mean, that's
right. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And today I was reflecting on this. I was reading an article by Bye. Jane's making me laugh in the comments. I will bring
Yes.
pie that Laura Ingalls Wilder baked. Jane Bosworth. And yes, I loved Laura Ingalls Wilder. I never met her, but I read her books incessantly. She was from the 1800s, though. So back to instructional design and today. So I was reading an article about Dr. Phil Hardman, who's she writes a lot about the intersection of AI and instructional design and how that's going to change what we're doing. And it's heartening because I think the last 2 years there's been a lot of panic about what's happening in our space. And she's doubling down now on, yeah, we can use these tools, but you really have to augment it with the human element. AI models are getting the instructional design wrong a lot of the time. And as I was reading that article, I was thinking, if I were to come into this space, I would focus on learning and I would focus on the learning piece, learning science. Like really, that's where all of us should be focusing our time most of all right now. Really double down on learning science. How do people learn? How do we design effective experiences? What does that look like? We're going to be using all of these new tools to augment the creative aspects, to augment the technology and help us design different experiences. But if we can be really thinking as critical learning scientists, learning designers, then we'll be able to use all these tools in our toolkit.
So you're touching on how instructional design is changing with these technological advancements. I want to inform that by looking back. I mean, your book is one of the few books in our space that has a second edition. It was something that was written, was very successful. It resonated with people, and then years later you came back and did a second edition. And I know the second edition goes deeper into things like assessment and the technology piece and the ROI. So I'm just kind of curious what prompted, first off, the desire to do a second edition, and what was different about the second edition from the first based on your experiences?
What prompted the second edition? I just felt like the first edition had gotten a little stale. Things had advances. It had been about 10 years. And more than that, I had advanced and grown. I had rounded out my pie a little bit more, so to speak, that sounds weird to say, but it's bringing my more business I'd spent more time in the technology space and the business space than I had previously. So I feel like I was able to round out some of that. So the book represents a more mature Cammy Bean brought to the table.
Absolutely. It's reflective in a tone.
Yes, exactly. Now I did published this. I think my manuscript was due October of 2022. And what happened in November of 2022? The world shifted, right, with AI. So I got in right under the wire. Your follow-up question is going to be, what are you going to do next with this? Like, you're going to come up with a new edition? I don't know. I think we're in this shape-shifting kind of space right now, and none of us know what's going to happen. A lot of shifting and changing. So maybe in another 7 years, I'll write another edition. We'll see. But it does still, it's still showing up on people's top 10 lists of getting started in the field. So there's something that resonates with people. It helps get them grounded, especially newbies, because the accidental instructional designer is very alive and very well out there. I meet them all the time.
So a core theme that goes across the whole book is this idea of being accidental, but shifting from this happened by accident, but I'm going to be intentional about how I step forward into it. What are some of the important things that you feel are representative of that shift of, I fell into this by accident, but now I'm going to put my arms around it and be intentional about the way I approach it?
So are you asking how would I suggest people get intentional?
Sure, let's put it that way.
Let's put it that way. So, well, start, but I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, great. Like, you're obviously curious and you want to build your skills and start figuring out where to go. Read my book. It's a great place to start. I reference a lot of amazing names and numbers out there. Get your bookshelf, be as full and as messy as mine with a lot of dusty books that I've read years ago, the stack of things that I want to read that I haven't gotten to yet. Stay curious and keep pushing yourself forward. Think about, I think for those, if you're on a team with other people, look at your cohort that you're working with. Do you represent that pie as a group? Because it doesn't have to be all you, right? You want to have a team that's going to help build your skills, or that's going to augment, I don't have a great knowledge of X, Y, or Z over there in that technology piece, but David, he sure does. I want to be working with him. So find the right partners, either internally within your organization or externally as vendors. Hello, I'm a vendor. Use your network, go to conferences, read books, learn, practice, try, experiment.
So I want to go back to the time when you first wrote this book. Thinking about how people reacted to it, was there anything about the book that when people got their hands on this and you started getting feedback, anything that surprised you since the book was published? Maybe something in the way that people reacted to it or applied insights that you didn't even consider when writing it?
That's an interesting question. I'm surprised by people who say, I bought this book for my entire team. I think, really? Great. I mean, that's awesome. I don't know why that surprises me. That's the whole feeling like a fraud thing, like, oh, it's actually useful to people. Yeah, just that it has had such resonance for so long. I mean, the fact that, 12 years in, it's still, like I said, I mean, yes, there's a new edition, but it's still showing up on people's top 10 lists.
It's I mean, in full transparency, when people come to me and they say, I got somebody new to the field, how do you new in this role, what do you recommend to get them on board? I ask the question of what did they do before, and if they've got no experience, this is it. Like I tell, go get this book. It's a great, because it meets people where they are, and so many of us are in that spot. It doesn't judge people for where they are in any way, shape, or form. It embraces it and helps them. So there's a reason it's in those top 10 lists. So kudos to you for that.
Well, thank you. And it still surprises me.
So for the last question, before I start to bring us to a close here, I want to shift your perspective from author to reader. What are some of the things, you've got a nice bookshelf behind you, what are some of the things that you've read that recently or in the past that you recommend people check out?
I could just turn my whole bookshelf or the camera over here. I mean, anything by Julie Dirksen is phenomenal in terms of just getting you grounded in learning science. Jane Bozarth is also on this in the chat. Read anything by Jane Bozarth. She's amazing. I have been reading, what have I been reading lately? I've been reading Will Thalheimer's The CEO's Guide to Training, E-Learning, and Work, Empowering Learning for a Competitive Advantage, which he has written for the CEO to try and help them understand how better learning solutions at your organizations will help you achieve competitive advantage as a business, right? Ultimately, most of us are in the corporate training business. We are here to help our companies perform better. So whatever that looks like, how can you use training to achieve competitive advantage? I have also been reading a book on coaching for performance and books on how to learn. That's really interesting to me. Jim Quick, Limitless was a fun book I read last year. It was a speaker, a conference keynote, I think at an ATD event. That was really fun. Or Ultra Learning by Scott Young. Read things outside of your domain too.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you bringing Will's up. Will was the guest on the last episode that I did and had some great insights talking about it. So if you're interested in exploring that, check out the conversation I had with Will as well. So Cammy, as we wind up our time here, one of the things I love about working with you and having you in my network is how giving you are and how open you are. You share openly, and I always appreciate that about you. Where can folks find, first off, the book, and where can they learn more about you to connect with you on is it LinkedIn or other places that they can reach out to you to connect?
I am super easy to find, Cammy Bean. Just find me on LinkedIn. That's it. The book is available on all your favorite online learning sources, including Amazon, including Barnes & Nobles, including ATD Press. If you're an ATD member, you will get a discount, and I'm on LinkedIn.
So as a closing question, if you called someone and said, I'm brand new in ID, what's the first thing that I should do? What would you recommend?
Buy my book. Read the dang book already.
Why are you asking me this question? You've got a book. That's an excellent answer, and I think a very appropriate place for us to close. Cammy, thanks so much for taking some time to share your insights from the Accidental Instructional Designer. The show notes will have a link to it. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. It's one of the best resources in our field. Cammy, thanks again.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.